minutes more, we will start.
Okay. So let's see what I do.
Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite aos internautas que nos acompanham neste programa Nanotecnologia do Avesso, no seu número 422. Fazemos este programa dedicado ao público não especialista, porque é este público que paga as pesquisas sobre nanotecnologia realizadas no Brasil. Também fazemos esse programa porque é aqui que nós podemos discutir os impactos da nanotecnologia na sociedade, no meio ambiente, na economia, nos direitos, na saúde, na ética, coisas que não são discutidas aonde se faz nanotecnologia no Brasil. Por fim, fazemos esse programa porque acreditamos que ser livre é ser bem informado, e a divulgação científica contribui, colabora para o aprofundamento da democracia e da cidadania no Brasil. Por fim, conforme tínhamos anunciado, estamos conectados com o professor Vicent Rotello, diretamente da Universidade de Massachusetts, nos Estados Unidos, que hoje vai aqui expor. O tema da sua entrevista é os nanomateriais como alternativa aos antibióticos. Okay, Vicent, could you please introduce yourself?
Hello, and thank you. I am Vicent Rotello, and I am a nanotechnologist, I guess you can say. I started off as a chemist, and I've been working in nanotechnology for about the last 20 years or so. And we've done a lot of different work, but I'll be talking about today is I'll be talking about some of the work we've been doing in antimicrobial research, where we've been trying to come up with new ways to solve what's turning out to be a really emerging threat to health, namely antibiotic-resistant bacteria.
Okay, I will put the screen. Your fish is like nanomaterials as antibacterial.
Okay, so let's see. What I'm wondering is, if I do this, hold on, where's this guy? Conversation, switch screens over down, and then I go there. Okay, can you see the presentation now?
Yeah.
Okay, so like I said, what I'm going to be talking about is I'll be talking about antibacterial nanoparticles. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can go after even more challenging infections, namely biofilm infections. And then I'll be finishing up with some of the new systems that we've been developing that are both degradable and very effective against both biofilms and antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So, if you're paying attention to the news, what you're going to see is that there's a lot of worry out there. There's a lot of bad things that are going on. And what tends to happen is that bacteria, they've been fighting out things for billions of years. And they use various molecules called antibiotics to kill each other. And so what we've done, being very smart humans, is we figured out that we can take these antibiotics that have been used all this time, and we can use them to fight disease. The challenge is, though, is that because these bacteria have been fighting so long, they can very quickly develop resistance to these antibiotics. And so what's happened is we've gone from having a situation where almost every disease could be fought with penicillin or sulfa drugs to what's called drugs of last resort, ones that are tend to be very toxic, tend to be very difficult to use and very expensive. What we see is that we're getting resistance to these antibiotics of last resort. There's an example, for example, of where a woman in the U.S. had an infection that was resistant to all 23 antibiotics that they had. The woman ended up dying. This is happening more and more. We're getting more and more antibiotic resistant, and it's a real challenge. Now, let's see. So, these MDR, what MDR stands for is multi-drug resistant. What that means is that you try to put antibiotics in the bacteria are tolerant of them. They're resistant, you can't kill them with it. And what the current prediction by the World Health Organization is that bacterial infections will kill more people than cancer by 2050. How do we get around that? Because we don't want people dying from these infections that we thought we were able to cure, just 10, 15 years ago. First strategy is we can develop new antibiotics, and that'll be helpful because with the new antibiotics, you'll be able to push off that date when you have bacteria that are resistant to everything. There's a second strategy, and that's the one that we use, which is to think outside the box. And instead of using an antibiotic, we've wondered whether we could take nanoparticles and nanomaterials and use them to fight infection. So, our first efforts were not very good. This was back in 2004. We published a paper where we looked at the toxicity of positively charged nanoparticles and negatively charged nanoparticles with human cells, red blood cells, and bacteria. And what we found that if you look here, we can certainly kill bacteria using our system. What you'll notice, though, is the dose that's required to kill the bacteria is higher than the dose required to kill our cells or to kill red blood cells. So what that means is this system is more toxic to the host than it is to the bacteria, which means it has a therapeutic index, in other words, of 0.3, meaning it's 3 times more toxic to us than it is to the bugs. And the concentration we needed to use was very high. So what we did is we engineered the system a little better, and we used gold nanoparticles once again, small 2 nanometer gold nanoparticles that had a more complex monolayer. Using this more complex monolayer, what we saw was much more efficient killing of the bacteria. And what we found was something that was very, very interesting, which was positive charge and hydrophobicity, or greasiness, is what gave the particles good antimicrobial properties. So if you have a sort of not very greasy particle, it's not very toxic. As we got more greasy, it reached a point where we had maximum efficiency, and changes after that were relatively small. So what that tells us is that hydrophobicity, in other words, charge and hydrophobicity, is the secret that kills the bacteria. So this study was done with a strain of laboratory bacteria, ones that we use specifically because they're non-toxic. How do these work against those dreaded multi-drug resistant bacteria? So to test that, we got ourselves a whole bunch of different bad bacteria. And these are ones that are resistant. If you look at CD549 right here, this is a bacteria that's resistant to 17 of those 23 different antibiotics. And this one down here, this Pseudomonas, is resistant to 13 of the 23, and the MRSA we used is resistant to 10 of the 23. In all these cases, we had very efficient killing of the bacteria. So that's pretty good. Another thing that's important is that the bacteria could not develop resistance to these nanoparticles. So if we did 20 generations of treatment with the particle, we saw no resistance generated. Whereas if we used antibiotics, we saw resistance generated after 5 to 7 generations. So we're killing the bacteria. How are we doing it? When we look at how we kill the bacteria, that gives us a clue as to why there's not resistance. What we're doing with these positively charged particles is we're punching a hole in the wall. And the way we can tell that is by taking bacteria, putting in a dye that does not go into the bacteria unless there's a hole in the outer membrane. And so if you take a look, what we have is E. coli and Staph aureus MRSA. We put in the nanoparticle and this red dye. We put it in there and we see that the red dye is inside the bacteria, meaning that we have punctured the wall of the cells. So if you think about it, what this is saying is that unlike an antibiotic, which interferes with a specific function of the cell, what we're doing is we're blasting the cell all open. If you think about that, the only way a bacteria can develop resistance to this sort of treatment is by developing a new cell wall. That's the sort of thing that takes a long time to do. So, that was nice. But we wanted to go after a particularly tough disease. That's biofilm infections. Biofilm infections are, once again, very much an emerging disease. If you think about MRSA, MRSA forms of biofilm. And what biofilms are is, remember I told you earlier that bacteria have been fighting wars for billions of years. What biofilms are is they're a fortress for bacteria. The bacteria build these walls around themselves comprised of very complex mixture of biological molecules. And these walls can protect the bacteria against other pathogens, in other words, the other bacteria. That's what we evolved for, but what it also will protect is we'll protect the bacteria against antibiotics and other antimicrobials. So how do we treat these really nasty infections that will take off limbs and will kill people? These include things like the wound biofilms, MRSA, which is a growing threat with, for example, diabetic wounds in the elderly. There's also internal biofilms. I don't know if you guys have them down in Brazil, but what we have in Massachusetts are lots of tick-borne diseases. Ticks are really nasty blood-sucking bugs. And it turns out that they give you infections that form biofilms internally. In other words, biofilms on your blood vessels. And that makes them very difficult to fight with antibiotics. So if you're looking at something like a wound biofilm like MRSA, antibiotics sometimes work, but very often they have to be excised. You have to chop them out. That's a very invasive approach and has very big health consequences and high risk. So this gets to the question. These biofilms have evolved over billions of years. How do you develop something that penetrates them? Well, it's a good thing that we're using new tools that the other bacteria don't have, because it only took us about 3 or 4 years to figure this one out. What we did is we took a bunch of quantum dots. These are nanoparticles that glow when you shine black light on them. So they're fluorescent nanoparticles. And we took neutrons, negatively charged quantum dots, positively charged quantum dots, and greasy hydrophobic positively charged quantum dots. What we found that the neutral particles don't penetrate the film, the negatively charged ones don't penetrate the film, but the positively charged hydrophobic both penetrate the film. So they behave similarly in some ways, but their mechanism is actually very different. When we take a look at the images, what we find is that the non-greasy nanoparticle, this one here, we see when we put the particles in the biofilm, they don't show up at the same place the bacteria show up. So what that means is that these positively charged non-greasy particles go through the space between the bacteria to penetrate. On the other hand, the hydrophobic ones, the greasy ones, those overlay with the bacteria. What that means is that these particles go at a island hop. They hop from bacteria to bacteria to work their way through the film. So this is nice. What it tells us is it tells us that positively charged systems and greasy systems are particularly good at penetrating the biofilms. So now we're going to go off and make a therapeutic. So what we thought, you go back and you take a look at history once again. Plants have to fight off bacterial infections. So one of the things that they do is they create oils that are antimicrobial. And so peppermint plant and mint plant will produce an oil that kills bacteria. It doesn't work very well when we try to use it because it's not water soluble in water and they don't penetrate biofilms. So what we thought is, what if we took droplets, microscale droplets of this peppermint oil and put positively charged nanoparticles around them? And our thought was that the nanoparticles would penetrate into the biofilms and then the oil would kill the bacteria. So we took these positively charged nanoparticles, we put in peppermint oil and cinnamaldehyde. And these are both antimicrobial essential oils, what they're called, the antimicrobial plant-derived oils. So we put them together, and what we see first is that when we put a fluorescent molecule into the nanoparticles, we see that the particles go to the same place. These are the bacteria in red, the particles are in green, and we see that they go to the same place. So what we have is this ability of the particles at least to penetrate into the biofilm. So the next question is, well, are we killing the bacteria? So when we do that, when we look at that, we find that these capsules work very well at killing bacteria. So when you look at the black line, that is our capsule system. And we see that at relatively low values of dosing, we get complete eradication of, in this case, a pathogenic Pseudomonas, or basically an infectious Pseudomonas. However, if we look at the particles themselves, they're non-toxic. The peppermint oil itself is non-toxic. If you look at Staph aureus down here, you see a similar story. You see in this case that you see very efficient killing of the bacteria, but you see very little effect from either the particles or the peppermint oil. So this is a system that works very well. Now, as I showed you before, though, the key question is, do we kill bacteria without killing the host? In other words, if we put this on our skin, will we just kill bacteria, or will we kill our own cells? It turns out the system works very well. What we did is we made a co-culture. What we did is we grew skin cells, basically, fibroblast cells, which is cells that your body uses to heal wounds. They're the first ones that grow to bridge the wound. We grew those, and then we put E. coli biofilm on top of them. And what we found is that if you look at the red bars here, you see that we kill the bacteria very effectively. I want to point out this, is that the bacteria are on a log scale. So we're going from 10 to the 7th bacteria, or let's see, 1 billion bacteria, down to 10 to the 2, or about 100 bacteria. So we're going from 1 billion bacteria down to 100. In other words, wiping out that infection. At the same time, the mammalian cells are growing better. They improved by 50%. This is a linear scale for the bacteria, for the human cell viability, right? So these are mouse fibroblasts, similar to ours. We see a 50% increase in growth. Turns out that what we're doing is we're putting in is that the cinnamaldehyde that we use as an antimicrobial actually also induces mammalian cell growth because it promotes an insulin-like growth factor signaling. So that's good. Now, one thing you might be wondering with this system is if we go back, we see that we've got a bunch of mean functionalized silicon nanoparticles, about 150 nanometers in this case. If you put these on a wound, what happens to them? Will they get in the bloodstream? If they get in the bloodstream, what consequence will they have? We don't really know the answer to either question.
Yeah.
So what we did is we moved to a polymeric system. And so, what's that?
Slide number?
Slide number, I'm on slide, let's see, now I'm currently on slide 15.
15, okay. This is the screen.
Okay. So with polymeric carriers, what I thought is we need to have greasiness and we need to have positive charge. So what we did is we took a positively charged polymer, reacted it with a greasy polymer. And what we found is that when we did this in the presence of an antimicrobial oil, rather than getting a capsule, we generated a sponge. And you can see the structure over here where you have this sort of almost fluffy type structure, because what's happening is you're forming this cross-linked network in the droplet. So that looks good so far. So the first thing we need to do is show that it really is a sponge. The way we can do that is using a fluorescence microscope. If we put a green dye in the oil and a red dye in the polymer, and then we move the two different channels, we see that we get this complete overall fluorescence, which indicates that instead of having a capsule structure where we expect to have the red on the outside, the yellow indicates that the polymer extends through the droplet. So when we have that, let's see, let's move to the next slide. Next question is, how does it penetrate? And so these are green dye loaded into the nanosponges, in with a red protein as before. We do the overlay, we get complete penetration of the capsule into the biofilm. If we don't have the sponge, that is, this is a sponge. Without the sponge, the oil sits on top. So how well these systems work? Well, they kill bacteria very well. We did MRSA and we did Pseudomonas. And in both cases, what you can see is the capsule, the sponge, kills very effectively with very little effect seen with either the oil by itself or the polymer. And if you put the oil on top, basically it doesn't do anything, it just sits on top. That's why it doesn't kill. So for selectivity, what we see with that is we see that as before, you get very efficient killing of bacteria. You go from 1 billion down to 100 bacteria. In other words, enough to wipe out the infection. In this case, we see basically no change in the human cells. And that's because we don't have cinnamaldehyde. If we wanted to put cinnamaldehyde in, we could, but we haven't done that. So, to summarize what we have, we figured out a few fundamental design properties to try to understand how to target these multi-drug resistant bacteria. first thing we found that positively charged systems not only are good antibacterials, they also are very good at penetrating into biofilms. This was a surprise because people thought that these positively charged particles would just get stuck with a negative charge and not move, but it turns out they penetrate well. We took that idea, we took those basic fundamental experiments we did, and we made a therapeutic by using nanoparticle stabilized nanocapsules. These eradicate biofilms and they stimulate mammalian cell growth. We also build on that to create a system that was more biodegradable, biofriendly, using polymer nanosponges that will destroy films even more effectively without harming mammalian cells. So, key to all this is a group as a group, and got a great group of people. Here's their picture, and I'd like to thank them for doing all the work. I will say that I never made a nanoparticle in my life. I never grew a bacteria in my life. These guys are the guys that are doing all the work. So I give them thanks, and I thank you guys for listening to me.
Okay, I have many questions, but not in detail because I don't have the knowledge, sufficient knowledge to discuss in detail your research. Okay, so I have more general questions. The first is about the cost. How much cost to develop this kind of research?
Okay, the cost to develop the research is development's expensive, I would say. Let's see, I'm just doing that. The development was I would say, depending on how you look at it, the cost for research for these projects has probably been a few $100,000 United States currency, and that's because we've done this work very inexpensively because we've never actually had funding for it. So we've always had to find little bits of money. So developing it was relatively inexpensive. What we're working on hard is we're working to make the materials be inexpensive, because if you're going to make an antimicrobial, you want it to be something that you can produce inexpensively and use. And so the systems I've shown you right now, we can produce for healthcare use. Basically, we can produce it for on the order of dollars a gram. We're also developing materials that we think we can produce on the dollars per kilogram level.
Okay.
So,
and how much people is necessary to the team of this kind of research? I saw the picture, but how people is in the same project or not?
this is the thing that's that I work very hard, is that it turns out we have 5 different projects, but everybody in those 5 different projects collaborates. So what ends up happening is, for example, when I showed you those experiments where we had the bacteria and the mammalian cells, the people that were doing the people that were, let's say, the person that made the antimicrobial went over to the guy doing the microbiology studies. The guy doing the microbiology studies then went over to one of the people doing the cell culture, mammalian cell culture for delivery, to do the culture model. So on this project, there's a core of 3 graduate students and 4 undergrads working on the research. But it turns out that about 20 people overall are involved in the project.
Okay, so big team. Working with bacteria, I think is not so easy, because you have to have many precautions to manipulate this, to use for the... So what kind of the precaution you have to develop this kind of research?
This is a very, very important question, because if you take a look at the bacteria,
Yes.
they're nasty. They have, all sorts of bad stuff. The key thing about the bacteria, though, we have is that they're not aerosolizable. In other words, they do not go into the air. So if you think about chemists are really very good about keeping chemicals off their skin because we work with stuff that will burn us, hurt us, poison us. So it turns out that chemists actually are pretty good at working with the pathogenic bacteria. We need to work in a separate hood. Everything that we use to handle them, everything that works with them is treated with bleach and then burned so that we don't spread. And everything is done in a special room with special hoods to make sure that there is no contamination. So we have the facilities that are required, and chemists are pretty good at avoiding the dangers of these systems. But we are very careful.
Yeah, and in your opinion, the nanomaterials is more danger or not if you compare with the bacteria?
There you have a really interesting question because in this case, what happens with nanomaterials is that they have unique behavior. That's why they're fascinating to study. But sometimes they have unexpected properties. So that's one of the reasons why when we make our nanomaterials, we make sure that we test them first against the mammalian cells, make sure they don't kill us on cellular level. And then what we're doing now is we're testing these on mice. And we're looking to see if there's any unexpected toxicity observed with the systems. And so far we haven't seen any. So the answer to your question is on these specific systems, we can be pretty sure that we're not causing toxicity. And because in particular, the polymer systems we have are degradable, there shouldn't be environmental toxicity. That's not true of all nanomaterials, where there can be both unexpected local exposure and also unexpected environmental effects.
Yeah, and you think that the framework to
Yeah, the reason we moved to the bigger systems is that we wanted to be able to work with the oil. So that's the other thing that's important with these systems is that when you look at those oil-based capsules and the sponges, there's very little nanomaterial in them. Most of the content is peppermint oil or carbachol, which is oil from the thyme plant, a spice. So relatively little nanomaterial, lots of other stuff. So that's not as big an issue. But the toxicity of the nanomaterial or the polymer is not as big because it's a small part of the overall mix. So the overall system becomes bigger. But we also made the sponges, at 100 nanometer scale, and they also work well at that size too.
Bacteria that you use in your research is in the nano scale.
Yeah, they are. If you think about it, the capsule that we use, for example, the nanosponges, are about 300 nanometers. The bacteria is around 2 microns. So yeah, it's about maybe 10 times bigger than the capsules, so than the sponges we're using. So yeah, they're on a similar scale, and that's one of the beauties of nanotechnology and biology is that the two work on the same scales.
And you have particular nanomaterials to attack, to destroy particular bacteria, or in general?
So this is the thing that we work on is that with this system, it is a broad spectrum antimicrobial. It kills everything, kills all the bacteria. It also actually works against fungi too. that kills bacteria in a broad spectrum. What we can do if we want to get specific bacteria is we can put antimicrobial agents in. So for example, that oil, we can dissolve antibiotics in the oil and then use that as a combination therapeutic where the oil, the sponge and the antibiotic work synergistically to kill bacteria, and because they work synergistically, they'll only kill the bacteria that the antibiotics targeted against.
Yeah, I think this because I asked you about this because I imagine we have in our body millions of bacteria, and if you have nanomaterials that attack all this, you have good bacteria and bad bacteria. How to control?
That's a very good point. That's one of the things that we are interested in with our system is that if you think about antibiotics right now, when a doctor prescribes antibiotics, what they will tell you is they will tell you, we want you to take this antibiotic every day for 1 week or 2 weeks, and you need to take it every day. Why? Because if you don't, then you won't have a high enough dose, the bacteria will survive and will gain resistance. Our system, the bacteria cannot become resistant to it. So if you think about it, if you want to, let's say that you have an imbalance in your bacteria, with an antibiotic, we wipe everything out. With our system, we can take out, say, 25% of the bacteria or 50% of the bacteria. And if you have an infection, very often, if you can pull down the level of the bacteria some, the natural system can take over. So think about an infection that, let's say you have an infection in your intestines, and if you were to take out half the bacteria and then repopulate using a probiotic, it would be much less invasive and much less side effects and also potential issues. And if you take a very strong antibiotic, wipe everything clean, and then wait for things to regrow.
Yeah, and in your opinion, this kind of reversal, we could understand how one revolutionary innovation or incremental innovation?
I'm going to say that I can't answer that question at this point. What I will say is that if in a few years you contact me again and it turns out that we have something that's in the clinic, then I will say it's revolutionary.
But if you think about the bacteria, the corresponding industry that produce medicine, antibiotics, is very, very old and very important. It's a big industry. And now you are starting another kind of industry that will use your research. In the end, maybe it could be one product.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. What we find is that the traditional antimicrobial community doesn't understand our approach. We're taking an inherently chemical approach and using it to fight bacteria, and that's very different than what they use. And so there is resistance, I guess you could say, if you can use that. There is resistance from the antimicrobial community. So if we can get it to work, then you're right. I don't think it's a revolutionary approach. I don't think polymers, even if they work, will answer all the problems. But I think they'll provide a really important new way to go forward to fight these infections, because it's clear right now, if you go into a retirement home and there are a number of people that are in quarantine because of MRSA, and these people can't be treated. If those infections can be treated, that will help the quality of their life. And I think we're seeing more and more of these infections. So I think it has the potential to change the world. I think the thing is that it's going to take some time and effort, because as you go to more and more complex systems, you always get surprises. That's an important thing for chemists to remember, is that biology is complicated.
In general, companies that have profit with one product in the market doesn't want to see new products to make some dispute for the market with the company. So it's to have access at this market that has some owners, is very complicated. But the innovation maybe could open some way to new products.
That's one of the things that we're doing, is that any time you come across a new idea, there's this combination of innovation and practicality. And so what we're doing with the research, and what we think is really key to moving it forward, is moving it towards more sophisticated models. So one of the things that we're working to do is we're working to, for example, collaborate with researchers on biofilm models. So we'll start off doing the mice. If we get the mice to work, then we'll start going after larger animals. But we feel that once we have the mouse studies done, we should be able to convince the rest of the world that there is practicality to the system. And once that happens, then we think we'll be able to get the commercial world more interested, because one of the things that's happened in industry is they become very conservative. They don't like to take risks. So what we need to do is we need to give them a system that isn't high risk. And so that's why we're working hard. That's why a chemist is doing mouse studies, because we need to do the mouse studies to convince folks that it does work.
Yeah. How much time between the start of the research and they have the product in the market?
In this case, it depends. We have a few different projects we're working on. One of them is just a topical antimicrobial, and that's one that you can put on surfaces or you can use as a hand wipe. We think that that's probably going to be 2 to 3 years. For the wound systems, it's going to take probably about another 2 years for us to go through mouse studies, and then another 2 years to go through large animal studies, most likely with pigs, and then another 2 to 3 years for clinical trials. So for something like this, you're probably looking at 5 to 7 years or so to be able to actually treat those wound biofilms.
And you have some help from financial help, some companies or not?
At the moment, we do not have help from companies, because they are too conservative. So we've been talking with them. So our funding comes from a mixture of we get a little bit of money from the state, and we get some money from the federal government, and that's what's driving the research.
Yeah. Similar here in Brazil, because the research here is only with public money. The companies here doesn't put money to make some research.
Yeah.
There is no the discourse is one, but in the practice, there is no people that believe in the innovation.
That's similar.
The money to discover new process, new products by innovation.
Yep, that's the same way it is here, and it's a function of how companies have become. They now, what companies are looking for is shorter and shorter term gain. They don't want to spend 5 or 10 years developing a new drug because there's too much risk and expense. So
this is the contribution of the state. Put the money, you do this work, and the future, not moment, the future, the company, this is very good, but I want to process. Right now, I continue to process this, try to put the product. So the beginning, that 7 years, is not interesting for the company. So it's the state that is interesting. Yes.
But the hope is that the companies will become interested at some point during those 7 years, because what you have in innovation is what's called the valley of death. And the valley of death is that area between where scientists think the research is interesting and where companies think it's significant. So for us, I think we will hopefully have luck doing the mouse, getting federal money for the mouse studies. But it'll be very difficult to get money for pig studies, because pig studies cost about $1,000 per pig, and that's very expensive. And you don't learn anything new scientifically. It's like, well, you did that a more useful model, but this isn't new science. So the hope is that we show it on mice, and then some investor will give us some money to do the pig studies and get us over that valley of death. And then once the pig studies are done, I think getting companies interested can be very easy.
Yeah. What is, in your opinion, the bottleneck to develop more or to keep the level of this kind of research?
I think the bottleneck is always going to be the trend. There's going to be two of them. One is coming up with the new system. That takes time, and what happens when you do that sort of very basic research is that most of what you do doesn't work. And so you have to get good at working your way through that. And then the second place that's very challenging is when you try to take what you've learned in a test tube or a culture plate and you bring it into the real world. And there's two different places. First of all, things behave very differently with animals than they do in cell culture systems. I didn't talk about it today, but we developed a system that was amazing at killing bacteria and very efficient. And it didn't kill mammalian cells at all. But then, and that was when we didn't have, when we had just buffer, but when we put it in serum to try to make it close to the real world, the system didn't work at all. So what we found is this stuff doesn't work in animals, it works great in a test tube. So it's that translation to the test, to the animal that's a big bottleneck. Then the final bottleneck is the unintended consequences. You develop something new, and we were talking earlier about nanomaterials and how you really can't always predict how they behave. Sometimes you have a system that behaves very strangely, either in the animal or environmentally. And so those are the things, those take a long time, because what you don't want to have is obviously people getting sick, people dying from unexpected, for example, immune responses to these sorts of systems. So the bottlenecks come, I would say, initial innovation, translation to the animal, and then translation to the person.
Yeah, and nowadays the possibility, another world war is a nuclear war. But I think the defense argument of the United States is looking for also the biological war.
Not sure about the.
What is the relationship with your research with this kind of the produce new knowledge in relationship to the biological war?
That's an interesting question. You know, we have not really pursued our research in the biodefense area, and in general, it's because of the system that we're focused on. We're really interested in biofilms, and the biofilm infection. That they have people have not really come up with ways to cause those. If they do, then we'll have a good defense on it, and certainly our system has the potential to work on other sort of bioagents. The real challenge with it is that I guess you can say that even with a group my size, we can't go after everything. So we're more interested in how these systems work against the wounds. And so,
but kill the bacteria is not important for the defensive areas to the United States.
I think okay, so we did apply for a Department of Defense grant on fighting biofilm infections, because indeed, if you think about soldiers wearing boots and hiking, and it turns out that biofilm-based infections are a major issue for soldiers, and so we applied for that grant, and we almost got it, but not quite.
Yeah, I think in the Massachusetts University, if I am correct, or in MIT, there is an institute for the soldier in nanotechnology.
That's at MIT, and so MIT is perfectly happy with that. We're not involved with it.
Okay, so I think it was very good your interview. We can have this debate. I have this kind of questions, general questions, because I am not specific detailed to discuss your methodology or your increasing knowledge. But for me, for us, was so good to see you, and we have now more knowledge about this proposal.
I would say that's the most important thing. You know, it's nice to talk to people that are in the area that I'm in, but I think one of the most important things we can do as scientists is to make everybody better consumers of what technology does.
Yes, exactly. I agree with you. And my next indication is when you have new knowledge, you finish another project, maybe we can add another problem to discuss with you this kind of new research that you finish.
I would be happy to do that.
Okay? So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.